Good evening to you who is listening in from Uganda, and good morning to those in the United States and where I'm hosting this conversation from. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are, and welcome to yet another edition of this important conversation, courtesy of the Alliance for National Transformation. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased and privileged to engage the Alliance for National Transformation founding leaders, and this is the retired Major General Mordecai Mugisha Muntu. I'm glad to announce that he's already here with us. So I will start with, General will start with giving you just a minute or two to say hello to everyone that is listening in. Then I will start the conversation officially.
Hello, good evening. Thank you, Mordecai, for hosting me. Greetings to you all who've had time to dedicate to this conversation. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, John, I'm going to start with a question that in line with what we are doing now or the platform that we're using. Social media, commonly defined as the new media, has become the new force to be used in several ways for specific agendas. But with politics, there are platforms to shape narratives, to influence people towards a particular way of thinking, mobilize and fundraise, to mention but a few. But I'm afraid it is not the case back home in Uganda. When you look at the way, to a greater percentage, how social media is used, more especially when it comes to politics, it has not yet gained the momentum that you would think. How can this change, and how can young people, whom I think are lucky to have this good weapon in this particular age, use it to impact change that we are yearning to see in our country, Uganda?
Well, I really hope that the ministry concerned, the IT ministry, would be given adequate resources, one, to do national sensitization on a sustained basis, to also develop the infrastructure so that there is countrywide coverage, but also for government to work on the reduction of the costs of internet, which are quite high as we speak. Those who are in the cities and in the municipal centers, at least those have stable internet. But the deeper you go in rural areas, the more unreliable you get internet connections. Once the infrastructure is worked on so that there is stable internet connections, and also when it is affordable, then the sensitization also needs to concentrate on how there can be those who invest in content, different forms of content, those who do educational programs, those who do enterprise development programs, those who may engage in whatever other programs that would enhance knowledge of the young people being the largest part of the population. And I think under 35, they're about 70% plus. For them to know that, yes, there are times when they can engage on social media for social purposes, for entertainment purposes, also to know that it is a tool through which they can develop themselves in whatever area of endeavor. A significant number of examples so far by a number of Ugandan youth who are innovative, those who have gone, for example, in the area of health, who are using it, and it is seen that you can actually start a business, that you can help people, that you can also generate resources. So if you look at all those aspects, one, the social aspect, the entertainment aspect, but also the aspect of how people can engage to develop their own business and entrepreneurial projects that they would have, then it would have, I think, an all-round coverage. Right now, I have a feeling that a significant number of internet users use it for, chit chat. You get into so many platforms, and you can find that maybe 80%, 90% of the time, people are engaged in light chatter, discussing social issues, discussing political issues. On the side of enterprise, I don't think there are that many people who are engaged into it. And therefore, there needs to be more and more sensitization and more training, hopefully, in the schools, in the O-level, HSC, universities, so that people would know that is an area which you can exploit to full advantage in whatever area of endeavor it is, whether you're in agriculture, whether you're in education, whether you are in health, whatever area you are in.
Very true. I think I truly agree with you. I think when I look at the vast majority of Ugandans, more especially young people, and how they use social media, it is more for light issues. And I've been telling them that, hey, you must wake up. I had not told you, but this conversation will have sections, and we are looking at section A that has 2 questions, and this is about to do with media. Going to question B in section A, commenting on what they defined as the propaganda model, Edward S. Herman and Noam Chomsky write in the introduction of Manufacturing Consent that media serve and propagandize on behalf of the powerful societal interests that control and finance them. The representatives of these interests are well positioned to shape and constrain media policy. Looking at the media landscape of Uganda, cognizant of the coverage of the last election, do you think the media is fairly serving Ugandans and their major interests? And if not, how then do you spread the message of liberation, if you want to put it that way, to the people of Uganda? Is fairly serving Ugandans and their major interests? And if not, how then do you...
The biggest challenge we face,
liberation, if you want to put it that way, to
dictatorships fear information flow. Since the beginning of time, whenever you find those who want to step on people's rights and freedoms, one of the things that scares the hell out of them is right information. Because when people are fed on correct information, it empowers them. And people who are empowered by information are not easy to manipulate. And that's why you find that all the dictatorships that have ever existed on this planet, one of the things they target is to ensure that they control all channels of communication. And then they also engage in propaganda that would influence public thinking in favor of those who would be in control of state power. And two, running media houses itself is it's an expensive venture, at least it used to be. And those who invest money into media houses want to protect their businesses, because most of those who set up media houses like TVs, like radios, most times you find that they themselves are not necessarily journalists, and they are looking at how to make profit rather than disseminating of information. And therefore, the challenge we face there is that when the regime exerts pressure on them, they also likewise exert pressure on those who are supposed to manage those media houses, the professionals. And therefore, you find that they engage in self-censorship. However, I think one of the advantages of modern technologies is that the professionals can start developing their own alternative media channels through the internet. And the moment they build credibility, then you can find that they become alternative sources of authentic information. I really hope that the professionals are going to work on that, so that those who control media houses, the big media houses, if they find that there are alternate, cheap media channels that become authentic and people are drawn to them, that means it creates competition. That means that those who have the big media houses would have to wake up. Otherwise, if you find that people are going to follow the professionals who run these internet-based media channels, which are not so expensive, but they give authentic information, they build names of credibility, that can only be the counter check that we can experience, that can be a counterbalance to the media houses that tend to manipulate information because of the pressure from the regime.
Mm. Then, in that line, do you think in times of an election like the one that we had recently, do you think there was better coverage from the media in Uganda?
In times of an election like the one that we had recently, do you think there was better coverage from the...
Come again? I'm not speaking you well.
Yeah, I'm saying that, like I said, cognizant of, how everything went in the last election, do you think the media gave enough, or what you'd call fair
I'm saying that,
to the,
like I said, cognizant of
to the candidates, all candidates
everything went in the last election.
or participated in the last election?
The media gave enough?
No, absolutely not. The ones that tried a little bit better than the others are those that were Kampala best. But most of those media houses up country, one, the expense of costs per hour are simply too high. I know in some of the municipal towns up country would charge about 2 million shillings per hour. How many countries would afford that? Kampala, they don't charge because Kampala, because of competition. The coverage is normally free. Candidates are given time. However, again, you'll find that most of the coverage would be more to the ruling party than to the opposition parties.
Hmm. Well, let's move to section B, where I'm going to be asking you about the army and the first son. I don't know whether you're certain, but you've been trending on social media. You're seemingly advice.
Let's move to section B, where I'm going to be asking you about the army and the first son. I don't know whether you're certain, but you've been trending on social media. You're seemingly senior advice to the commander land forces.
The command of the land forces, when you are trying to give him advice, of asking him to ask the commander-in-chief, who doubles as his father and president of Uganda, to retire him from the army as he pursues his political agenda. It ensued into an unexpected, interesting exchange. For context of our conversation, I will read verbatim what his response was, and yours as well. Then I'll ask you my question. He said, General Greg, first of all, habari ya siku mingi sana. I hope you are well. Secondly, me, my father, and practically everyone else in the UPDF does not require your insight into anything. Please keep it for yourself and your small collapsing political party. In which you responded, I am well, thanks. I'm sure you are. I think you were too soberly reread my initial remarks. You will find that I referred to your insight, not mine. Also, it is do not need, not does not need. I wasn't under the impression that my opinion was required. I gave it anyway. Since then, one would think that there's been ceasefire. That's what I've read on social media, what people are saying. the question I want to ask is, what do you take of his unwillingness to retire from the army as he pursues a political career? And then I will ask you another question from there.
Unfortunately, at this point in time, they keep on evading the main question, because my advice is just simple, that any officer who wants to join politics just needs to get out of uniform to retire. That's what the law says. And that's what I keep pointing out. I never want to stray outside of that. Unfortunately, whatever responses are given so far, they evade that question. And my intention is that we'll keep insisting, we'll keep on trying to raise that question. And I'm really hoping that the rest of the Ugandan people, those who have got platforms from which to speak, like religious leaders, like all people of influence, need to keep raising that question, because it's a legitimate question. It's not partisan, it is not personal. It's just a question of all of us operating, as equal before the law. That's all.
General.
Yep.
General, could you please, I'm sorry to interrupt, but could you please accept the invitation to speak on Twitter Space, because you're not coming through there. So all the people on Twitter are not getting your responses.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Then does that mean I will have to ask the questions again?
You might have to ask some of them. The questions have been heard, but I think his responses were not coming through on Twitter.
All right.
Can you hear me now?
Not yet. I've sent you the invite. If you just check again, it should come through. You can check it on your Twitter itself.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do.
Okay.
Have I come through now?
No, it would be showing. So
It shows as a listener here.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I see there's a request from you. Approve.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, you should be okay now.
So can you hear me now on Twitter?
No.
You can't?
No.
Because I sent you a request.
I approved it, but it still hasn't come through.
It's still connecting here. I think I have to engage these people. Okay, he's here now.
Okay. You can get me now on Twitter?
Yes, let me ask the question again, probably.
Yep.
Apologies for a little bit of technicalities. I'm quite certain many of you are not able to hear the general responding to some of the questions that I asked. But the other question I had asked is telling him how he's been trending when it comes to Twitter after he came out to give what one would look at as senior advice to the command of the land forces, Lieutenant General Mordecai Muriisa, of using his insight to ask the commander-in-chief, who happens to be his father, at the same time the president of Uganda, to retire him from the army as he pursues his political agenda. It morphed into unexpected and interesting exchange. For a context, I read what this exchange was from the first son. He said, General Greg, first of all, habari ya siku mingi sana. I hope you are well. Secondly, me, my father, and practically everybody else in the UPDF does not require your insight into anything. Please keep it to yourself and your small collapsing political party. You responded, I am well, thanks. I'm sure you are. I think if you were to soberly reread my initial remarks, you'll find that I referred to your insight, not mine. Also, it is do not need, not does not need. I wasn't under the impression that my opinion was required. I gave it anyway. So then I told you that in one or the other, someone would think that there's some sort of a ceasefire now. And my question was about one thing I have known about the values of men and women in uniform is respect and dignity. What happened here? And what do you make of his unwillingness to retire from the army and pursue a political journey or career?
I simply have no understanding of why one General Muhoozi would not retire from the army and pursue his political interests if he's interested in politics. That's one. Two, it's also perturbing to recognize that even if he himself is not willing to retire, that the army itself would not do so, more so the commander-in-chief. However, the advice we gave was just a simple one, saying that follow the law, like the rest of us do follow the law. Like all uniformed officers and men who would want to pursue politics, they just need to get out of uniform and pursue whatever careers they want to pursue, including politics. Now, most of the responses that I have seen evade the question of getting out of uniform. You know, they respond to so many other things, raise so many other issues, which are completely outside of the main question of uniform. We don't intend to be diverted from that issue. We just have to keep raising it because it's an issue of concern. One hopes that they reach a point and respond positively. I don't know how they react. It's our responsibility to keep on raising that question, to raise the public awareness, but also to raise the issue of all of us must be equal before the law, even if it is not the practice now. But that's how struggles advance, because we cannot just simply keep quiet because that's how things happen. You know, we cannot accept that mistakes keep on being made and we get tired of raising them. However many mistakes are made, we have to keep on raising them until a significant number of Ugandans reach a point where they say enough is enough. I don't see any other alternative.
Then the other question that I would ask, you commanded the UPDF, and like I said, one of the things that I've known about men and women who serve, it is respect and dignity. Do you think it still exists in our army with a number of, now that is happening at this particular moment, how he responded to you? Do you think it is one of the value that is still upheld?
You know, it's a struggle. The struggle that is on is not only, in the area of politics. I also know that in the army itself, the manner of advancing these struggles is different. In politics, we can go on platforms and speak. We can go on TVs. We can go on radios. In the army, you can't do that. However, I know for sure that UPDF being composed of quite a significant number of officers and men who are well educated, who are highly trained, that there must be in their own minds, a debate within their own minds as to what is right and what is wrong. Now, what I noticed though in Uganda is people who have almost given up on UPDF because of the errors that have been made. And maybe we need to address that question by looking at the experiences we've had on this continent, because there are two situations on this continent when you look all over. There are countries that have had one army since their independence. And some of those countries have even suffered coups. I mean, if you look at a country like Nigeria, that's gone through a significant number of coups. You look at countries like Congo, DRC, or former Zaire, went through a lot of turbulence, but they still have one army. Even when that army has gone through phases of times when it will just be anti-people, when it carry out atrocities within countries, but those armies have never been vanquished, nor have they ever been disbanded. What does that mean? That as the political processes advance, and as those countries keep on trying to democratize, they also simultaneously try to put in place an environment where armies can be professionalized. We have seen that happening, for example, in Ghana. Ghana now is fair advanced in terms of the democratic processes. The Ghanaian army has never been broken up. It has never been vanquished through war or anything. So it also starts getting professionalized. Now, in other countries, like here in Uganda, we have had 3 armies. Two have been vanquished through war. This is the 3rd army, UPDF. So the question is, okay, even when UPDF is making mistakes, what do you do? Because there would only be 2 alternatives. Unless people say we can't work with this army, the only alternative that would be left in that regard is to organize a superior force, fight, vanquish them, and establish a new army. That's what exactly happened when we fought and vanquished UNRA and established NRA, which eventually became UPDF. And there are still errors being made. But most times, actually, I think 80–90% of the times, the errors which you find in the armies are rooted in wrong politics. So until we sort out the politics, the armies find themselves in a lot of problems. So we need to recognize that. In my own view, I think that the concentration of solving the political questions that we have, hopefully that we can establish a political environment in which the many officers and men within UPDF who have got the capacity, who I believe quite a significant number of them, who really love their country, but who get caught up between a rock and a hard place. Once there is a conducive environment, a political environment in which they can professionalize, they would professionalize, I have no doubt about that. At least to me, that is my thinking. Whatever errors UPDF is making, whatever mistakes it makes, that the only solution for them to put right what has gone wrong is to create a conducive political environment in which they are given space within which they can professionalize, they can carry out reviews, see how to create balance within the forces, and rectify a number of other attitude problems that you find still in the army. So in regard to this question of one general not respecting the law, well, that is politics. Because I don't think that is even in the area of the military. I don't think they can solve it in the military. It has to be solved on the political side. We have to keep on mounting pressure to a level where the regime has to act.
Thank you. Right with that. In the past, we have seen the army practically participating in partisan politics. Many individuals have been jailed, allegedly killed, and many admitted, all implicating the army. We have the likes of Mr. Abel Kandiho sanctioned by the United States. When you talk, we have comments of President Museveni saying, referring to the UPDF as my army. Then I remember, I think it was Minister Anita who said, we have the Maje, trying to refer to this army as theirs. So I understand what you're trying to say. There's need to organize amongst us so that we fix the political system and that we eventually have an army. But do you still have that trust in this, in this army that you once commanded? And maybe the question must be, do you think the UPDF is still the same? I mean, I was seeing very heartbroken when I saw a number of army officers, participating in celebration of the Command of Land Forces birthday celebrations.
Well, unfortunately, we cannot read what goes in people's hearts. That's one thing God has denied us. I would like to, if we had a way of reading into people's hearts, I would like to believe that quite a number of them have been bleeding in their own hearts. Because I know many of them would know what is right. They would know what should not be done. But they are limited. I mean, they are not like us in politics. Because in politics, you can go on TV and you can denounce other politicians. You can say whatever you want to say. We are not restricted. But when you are in the army, it's a disciplined force. And you are supposed to act in certain ways. You don't, go out in public and you start saying whatever you want to say. There is that intention in the army. Anywhere in the world where you go, you'll find that. In more stable conditions, in countries where there are functioning systems, what the army would do is that behind the closed doors, outside the public view, if there was that culture which was already established, it hasn't been yet in UPDF, is for the senior commanders to discuss in their own high-level meetings, do scenario building, work out what would happen if such a scenario emerged, what would happen if such a scenario emerged, and also study the political environment in the country. And then they would go and advise the commander-in-chief and say, sir, we think there is this kind of situation. And we think if this is not done, this is likely to be harmful to the country. We don't have that in Uganda. I know in some African countries, at least they have reached a level where they've done that. The transition in Kenya, the army played a big role in advising President Moi not to take certain actions. And that's why they eventually had a smooth transition. In Uganda, we don't have that culture yet. So I would like to believe that I really feel for those senior commanders who are in UPDF, because I know the kind of situation they would find themselves in. Most of those who know what is right, those who want to act in a professional way, but who find themselves between a rock and a hard place. I really feel for them.
I'll now go to this is section section C, and when I'm going to be looking at opposition strategy to overwhelm Mr. Museveni. And question A, I'll start with there are contradictions and controversies on how best will the people of Uganda overcome Mr. Museveni's rule. These controversies have descended leaders in the opposition with their fan bases into a state of paralysis and polarization. In fact, people continuously debate on how and what must be the strategy. Many have talked about defiance, it could be one. I understand you have talked about building capacities, going down to the grassroots structures. Others are thinking of boycott. Others think that the election can actually do it. And I know you, as the Alliance for National Transformation, you believe in building capabilities and capacities, but under what strategy, if I may ask?
It's a question that has plagued us for quite a significant period of time within the opposition. Unfortunately, it seems like we've not responded appropriately well to it yet. Otherwise, there wouldn't be the conflicts that we still see. My own perspective and the perspective that we share widely within Alliance for National Transformation is to recognize that there are a number of legitimate ways through which a regime needs to be fought and through which can be effective, like defiance or civil disobedience. We believe that it is a legitimate tool of struggle. We also recognize that those who believe that you can build the capability to overwhelm a regime through the electoral process, that's also a legitimate path, in spite of the challenges that are on the way. Or in the path of whichever route anybody takes, whether it is civil disobedience, whether it is organizing for electoral victory, both paths are full of impediments, which are deliberately put in the way by the regime, which is expected because all dictatorships will put impediments in the way of those who want to bring positive change. I think what we need to recognize is that, look, if you believe in civil disobedience, concentrate on organizing around that. And don't worry about those who are organizing in a different way, even if you think in your own mind that that way is not effective. So concentrate on what you think is effective. Let those also who believe, for example, that you need to build organizational capabilities until you overwhelm the regime through an electoral process, also do that without undermining or demeaning those or provoking those who have taken a different path. Because in any case, logic would indicate that whichever is effective will work. So what would be the problem if the strategy which is effective works even before the other one works? Because if one works, then we would have achieved the objective that we desire. So why on earth would people who are, moving on different paths conflict when the objective of removing the regime is similar? That one has always perturbed me. So what we decided to do and what we do in Alliance for National Transformation, we do what we believe works. We don't attack anybody who's doing anything different to avoid conflict. And to a large extent, it has paid off, because where we are at, we are not in conflict with any other opposition party. Whether people say whatever they want to say, we don't respond. Why? Because we want to avoid strife within the opposition. Strife does not help, because the population is caught between a rock and a hard place. They are frustrated with the regime. And when they see us engaged in, internecine strife or strife that is generated amongst us, it completely makes them so frustrated. So we have to learn to do that in the opposition, that each group organizes around the strategy they believe in, or if they believe in a dual strategy, organize around that, but don't fight with any other group. That's the only way we can survive and also win the confidence of the population. Because without trust, it's very difficult to build.
Very true. I think you are raising a very important point there. Is I've always had a question of really, these people are onto one mission. Why would you think that the other person's strategy is actually a challenge to you? Do whatever you're supposed to do and leave the rest to the people. So thank you so much. I'll ask question B in section C. Retired Colonel Dr. Chiza Besigye, with the red card front, have been concerned about the skyrocketing of prices of basics of life in Uganda. He chose to express his frustration through protest and mobilizing Ugandans, like he's done in the past. I am certain you know that he was jailed only to be released a few days ago. Do you think that that changes it? And why is it difficult for other political parties to join him or individuals? And Ugandans as well, because these are the ones that are directly affected. I've told people that, hey, if you look at what he's doing, he's trying to actually awaken you, the masses, because he can afford everything that he wants in life. And I believe some will argue that change can come in all ways. But do you think the opposition in one way or the other abandoned him deliberately, or they, and I'll be asking Alliance for National Transformation, do you think some sort of a protest like this can do anything in terms of change?
Personally, I believe in civil disobedience as a legitimate tool of struggle. I have no problem at all with the colleagues who have chosen that path. However, those who are building around the civil disobedience have to really work 24/7. Because the only problem I notice in Uganda, one, the levels of consciousness of our population are not that heightened to a level where they would just mass up on the streets. And two, which is a very, very complicated thing that needs to be worked on by those who concentrate on civil disobedience. You have to do a lot of training before you directly engage. You have to do training. It's a painstaking effort. You must ensure that you train so many leaders, layer after layer, so that in the event that a top leadership is arrested, that other layers spring up. But this is not a struggle of any one individual. Now, the unfortunate part I have noticed, when one person is arrested or two, the struggle completely dissipates. So that needs to be seen as a challenge that has to be resolved by those who concentrate on civil disobedience. They have to invest time and effort and resources in ensuring that they sensitize those who would be going on the streets, that they know that arrests are a natural response of all dictatorships. And therefore, you must be psychologically prepared for the arrests. That's one. But two, prepare for fallback positions. So that when one layer of leaders is arrested, the next layer springs up. When the next layer is arrested, the third layer springs up. That's the way you can sustain a struggle of that nature, which means you have to invest time and resources. Because if you don't do that, it becomes easier for a dictatorship to neutralize you.
Absolutely. Allow me now go to section D. And here we shall look at lifestyle and the people of Uganda. Question A is, I will again go back to and quote from that interesting book I mentioned earlier before, Manufacturing Consent by Edward S. Herman and Nauchowski. There's something that is mentioned there. They say that in a system of high and growing inequality, entertainment is the contemporary equivalent of the Roman games of circus that diverts the public from politics and generates a political apathy that is helpful to preservation of the status quo. Let's talk about Uganda's electoral structure. Civic education must be at the center of any democracy. It is meant to empower citizens to be well informed, active citizens, and provide them an opportunity to change the world around them. Having moved around the country first with the party formation consultative engagements, and then throughout the presidential election campaign trail, what do you make of our people? I'm afraid for what I saw when I was covering different parts of Uganda as a reporter. But hey, you moved around the country. What do you make of of our people in terms of civic education? Why have they ended up falling for the Roman games of circus, what one called bread and circus?
Low levels of civic awareness are always an advantage for dictatorships. And most dictatorships would not carry out civic education because they know that people who are empowered, who have got civic awareness or high levels of political consciousness, cannot easily be manipulated. Now, the dilemma we have in Uganda is that the body which is meant to carry out civic education, which is the Electoral Commission, one, it is not funded for the purpose. Two, literally, it is manipulated by the regime through and through. So the only other channel through which we can carry out civic education is by political parties, by civil society organizations, by the faith organizations, and anybody who has got a platform. Because you clearly notice when you go in the rural areas, for example, you see the low levels of civic awareness. I mean, when you talk about issues like corruption, some people don't even relate to corruption. They think it is something which is happening in Kampala. They just say, I have my money. Nobody has stolen my money. So why should I care about what you are talking about, government money? They don't really recognize that it is their money. I imagine if someone is thinking like that. Or two, if you find that someone who owns some chicken and some goats and sheep, which, I mean, a chicken is about 30,000 shillings. A goat is now about 200,000, maybe sheep around that as well. And then he or she is paid 1,000 shillings, 2,000 shillings, 3,000 shillings to sell their right to choose, and not knowing that it is from making the right choices that the challenges that they meet in their day-to-day lives are going to be resolved because they have elected a person whom they have sent to go and solve their problems, whether it is in the health sector, lack of drugs, whether it is in agriculture because they don't have adequate agriculture extension services, whether it is in education because of low pay of teachers and lack of feeding for the kids, or whatever challenge there are. They don't relate all those things, and those can only be brought to their understanding and their consciousness through civic education that is done on a consistent basis. That's what the dilemma is. However, those of us who really want to see a better country can't give up. We must keep on using whatever channels are available, keep on talking and talking and talking. until a critical number or a critical mass of Ugandans is built up to a point where it can overwhelm the system and establish a new one, hopefully a better one.
I'm looking at what happened in France in 1789. Some of the Frenchmen that came to America to fight, to help the Americans fight against the British, when they after the war, they realized that what these people, the Americans, were going through, and many of them were motivated to go back to France and fight King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, because they're actually badly off compared to what these Americans were fighting for. Our people have been reduced to mere beggars, not only beggars, but very, very poor. What do you think are people? Because I get a number of questions from people, more especially from the States and other countries, the MDCs. They say, if people really believe that, they are cheated, been reduced to this level, why cannot rise up and overwhelm Mr. Museveni in any way? Why are they willing to even ignore per se?
I think there's a weakness at the level of leadership at different levels. There is a problem of leadership at different levels. And the only way we can eventually succeed, not only in overturning this regime, but also building a credible alternative base for better governance, is to concentrate on leadership right from RC3 level, RC5. Because peasants anywhere in the world, there's no way you can ever have a revolution which is led by peasants themselves. Most times they have to be led by people who have evolved to a higher level. And that's why I think the biggest difficulty is the biggest number of Ugandans who are at the level of in the middle class, or those who are opinion leaders, like in the rural areas. Unfortunately, a significant number of them are playing politics of survival. And the movement is very smart at that game. And that's why I think the majority of the people are frustrated. There are many people who would want to see change, but if they are not led by people who are bold, who cannot be compromised by money, not compromised by positions, they become frustrated. And I think that's where the biggest challenge is. But we can't give up. We have to keep on working and organizing and talking until that number it grows to a significant level where it can mobilize around wherever they are, and we have seen it happen a number of times in the past, much as there have been reversals. But we have seen a time when literally a big chunk of West Nile was in the opposition. Choi region, Teso region, Lango region, Buganda region has now shifted. Some parts of the West had started shifting, but unfortunately there have been reversals in those areas, which means that we didn't, I think, study or analyze that situation quite well. And I think General Museveni outflanked us. Because ordinarily, when you are fighting, when you take you consolidate it and then you expand. In this particular case, as new territories were being won over to the side of change, the territories which had been on our side, he outflanked us, and a number of reversals happened in those areas. These are lessons that we need to learn. As Ugandans want to see change, those which had been in the opposition before, until we were able to overwhelm this regime. But also, two, very, very critical, is that even when this regime is changed, that there is adequate preparation for the next political dispensation, that it will be better than what we have seen so far in the last 60 years. Otherwise, we'll be remaining in a vicious cycle.
Yeah. I will ask, I will now go to section E, and that will be our last section, and then I will invite in everyone that is listening in to ask a question or two to you. Uganda politicians seem most of the time they come to life a year or months before the general elections are held, usually most of the opposition parties are in the habit of doubling down after losing an election, to the extent that they even go into self-destructive mode. This is mostly because of the blame game that ensues after losing and slows down their momentum for mobilization. I want you to hint on the mobilization and how convincingly or how large it can be to convince over 45 million people. Then why do you think some politicians go into a state of slumber after the election? And I'm quite certain you commented this and probably over-commented on it, but the opposition disunity, why do they go into that every after an election?
I think there are varied reasons. There are varied reasons. At times it is fatigue. There are those who go through the electoral process and they come out fatigued. Two, there are those who spend a lot of money in the electoral process, and when they get out, they are trying to recover after a while. But the most critical one is resources. Mobilizing and organizing on a nationwide scale is an expensive venture. Now, there are parties which so far have got members of parliament. So those to some extent can try and do something, but it can't be much. Because I think like now, NUP, which has about 60 members of parliament, or is it 57, is supposed to get about 4 billion Uganda shillings in a year. So if you divide that by 12, that would be about 300 and something million. FDC, which is the second largest, has about 30 something members of parliament, I think gets close to 2 billion. Now, if you divide that in 12 months, that would be about 100 plus million. Well, you can use that target and do certain things. It's not enough. Now, there are parties, of course, which don't even get much, like DP. I don't think they have got many members of parliament. PPP, JMA have got only one, which means they get maybe about 50 million. We don't have a member of parliament yet, so we are not funded by electoral commission. What does that mean? It means that Ugandans who want change must invest in change. We have said this before, we'll keep on saying it. The money which the parties which have members of parliament is not adequate for them to mobilize for these 2-3 years by 2026. So our view is that Ugandans who want change need to look at the parties that they believe in. Those who believe in NUP, subscribe to NUP or give donations to NUP. Those FDC, similarly. Those to JMA, similarly. Those DP, similarly. And those to Alliance for National Transformation, similarly. We are not talking about lots of money. Because I think if we get people who can give 2,000 shillings, 5,000 shillings, 10,000 shillings, the cumulative effect, if the numbers are large, can be huge. Because if averagely you get about people who can give, say, 10,000 Uganda shillings per month, and you get 50,000 who can do that, basically you're talking about 500 million a month. A party which has got disciplined leadership and is focused, in 2 years, is nowhere it will not have reached every village, every parish, every sub-county of this country. Now you can imagine a party, okay, even if it doesn't reach 60,000 villages physically, but if it reaches 11,000 parishes and 2,000 sub-counties, and it has got leadership at that level, then it will have reached the villages as well, because it is easier for the sub-county to mobilize parishes and parishes villages. That's all be working in identifying and preparing candidates at the low levels. Because another error I think that we have is to only target the presidency of the country. Our view in Alliance for National Transformation is you want to bring out a regime, one of the best methods is you cut it by its roots. Because if you are able to take a significant number of, as opposition, significant number of councillors at LC3, you take significant number of LC3 chairpersons and LC5 councillors, LC5 chairpersons, and mayors, and you have a balance of 45 to 55, or 49 to 51, or 50-50. you will have changed the balance of forces, political forces in the country. Even in the event that you are cheated at the presidential level, you create a counterbalance. In Kenya, you can't find a ruling party messing up the whole country because the opposition is almost 49-51, or at times in some areas 50-50, you know. So we have to operate at all those levels. You cannot do that unless you have got financing. The only way you can get financing is from small contributions. That's one aspect. The second aspect, why small contributions from citizens is very, very critical. It is not only for domestic purposes, because right now, we are not just an island as Uganda. Uganda is part of Africa. Africa is such an attractive area where everybody else, every other economic power is looking at Africa. Why? Because of raw materials, because of minerals. So how do you protect your interests as a people? By having credible leaders and credible parties. How do you get credible leaders and credible parties? By building them. Because if you don't get credible leaders in any African country, those leaders will sell out the country. That's why you get people who come and take minerals on the cheap, who will not be able to build robust economies. And therefore it creates joblessness. It creates a lot of frustration. We have got expanding population. So funding parties is not just a question of how to fight against this dictatorship. It is also how to bolster the parties which eventually will be into power, how to be cushioned against any temptations from the outside. Three, there are lots of money, rotating all over this world with all kinds of interests, and as they say, there is no free lunch. Anybody who comes and puts a lot of money into a party, they must be having a certain interest that they want to be served. So if these parties are not cushioned, if they are not immunized, what do you think will happen? More so if the leaders in parties themselves don't have the strength of character to work for the interests of countries, regardless of whatever external interests there are. So our people need to understand all these things. We fund weddings, we fund burials, we fund all kinds of things. How can we not fund politics, which is at the center of our existence?
That's very, very interesting that when you said that, we fund all kinds of ceremonies from birthday parties to burial. But how come that we are not willing to fund?
Yeah, we fund even birthday parties. That you are correct.
Yeah, and birthday parties for 1 year old is funny. So very important. So the other question that I want to ask, then I will now go to the audience, is about items of the opposition alliance. Before alliance could formalize the existence, more especially in Uganda, there's always internal bickering, as everyone is just for what one would think is for positions. And this wastes a lot of time, resources, and Ugandans usually ask, why have you been going into this if you know that probably it wasn't going to work? Others actually think it is always a competition of egos from men and women within these political parties that usually bring the idea of alliances, of an alliance in Uganda. What is the major factor? One, for the bickering, and two, failure to form an alliance in Uganda. And should we actually have that conversation? Because it has always been coming towards an election. Every election that we go to, that conversation usually comes up. So what's your take on that?
We are products of our own society. We, the politicians. We have not fallen from Mars. We are products of our own society, our own culture, which has really, for the last 60 years, politics has been so built on deception, on intrigue, on lies. And to a large extent, many people think that you cannot have an honest politician. And of course, as you very well know, it has led to the common saying where people say politics is a data game, so they don't want to join a data game. And I think that's where the error is. Because how would that be reversed? Because there are many Ugandans who, if they were in parties, would be a counterweight to individuals who are driven by their own egos to move organizations in whatever direction they want them to go. Because if you don't have strong men and women, and they are there, they are very, very many in Uganda, but many of them are not in politics. So what do we expect? I mean, we are simply reaping what we sow because nature hates vacuums. If the men and women of integrity leave politics and they say, you know, politics is a data game, they cannot join it, then, you know, nature hates vacuums. Those who go into it are those who are there. And therefore, it is us that people have to deal with. Until those who want to come in and change the dynamics even of politics within the opposition. That's another thing which I simply cannot understand. Because even when General Museveni gets out of power, which will happen, I mean, it is so obvious. I don't know whether there's anybody who doubts that General Museveni won't be out of power. He'll be out of power, but that means there would have to be another set of people who manage power. So if we don't get honest men and women who join politics so that when a new group gets into power, that they can act as a counterbalance to anybody who gets overwhelmed by power, because that's also another factor. People just hear about power. Power has got its own temptations. There are many people who go in there without any bad intentions or any ill intentions, but they get there and they can't withstand the temptations of power. They get overwhelmed. But if you had a significant number of men and women of integrity, one who have character, who can stand firm, then they could act as a counterbalance to those who get overwhelmed. But if you get the majority of the people who are overwhelmed by, you know, pomp and glory and money, the outcomes are what I mean, what we should expect. You know, the Bible says that whatever man sows, so shall he reap.
Absolutely. We architects of our own misfortune or fortune. That's one thing that I clearly understand. So I want to invite open the conversation to the audience, especially for everyone that is listening in Twitter space. You can now send in your request and then you can ask your question to the general officer with accepting Duke Louis is sent already. Now you can speak Duke Louis.
I couldn't pick that. Mordecai, I could not pick that.
Duke Louis, I have invited you now. You can speak.
Mordecai, I couldn't pick that.
I said now I've opened the conversation to the people that are following us on Twitter so they can ask questions.
Okay.
Duke Louis, I've invited you. I've accepted your request, so now you can pose a question to the channel. Looks like we can't get you now. I will accept an invitation from Gibson. Hello, Gibson. Gibson is still connecting. Yes, Gibson.
Of us really follow what you tell us, and we really love the way you address us, the way you tell the truth. And now the thing, what I want to ask is one, we have always been seeing this happening. I don't know whether I talked about, because I joined a conversation when it was already on the way. We have always been seeing this happening, whereby every time candidates come out and they're complaining, from the chair, from the council level, the MPs to the presidents, they are complaining about votes. And what we all know is that the government that is in place is the one concerned with everything that is always taking place during the elections and what and what. Some of us come out and try our best to see that we try to see how we can bring change in the country by participating physically. Sometimes we are beaten, sometimes we are arrested, and finally God helps us to come out. But we have always been seeing this happen, whereby the Electoral Commission is not just, is not doing what it is supposed to be done. And when we go to the courts of law, we also face the same challenge, whereby the courts of law and the Electoral Commission, they all work in hand with the current government, which is taking us. So, Mr. General, I don't know how we are going to work on that. I think you can give us advice, because some of us have really are really tired of this. Maybe one time we will go on the streets and do something of which is not good, but we really don't know how we can do that, because time of elections we come out, we are calling agents, we are doing everything, but things come out in a way that we don't expect. So how will the Electoral Commission change and we get justice when the current government is taking when it is the government is still taking us? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gideon. I think you can respond to him. He's asking about, I think you heard him clearly.
The Electoral Commission and the unfairness in the electoral processes. One, it also shows the weakness of us as the Ugandan people, because look, we have had so many commissioners so many times. The law is very clear. They have got security of tenure. Electoral Commission has got security of tenure. You cannot just manipulate them if they choose to follow the law. They are adequately remunerated. So it's not a question that they could be compromised with money. The issue is character. I mean, they all go there and you know, out of fear. Now, we have seen countries that have turned around because the electoral commissions have taken a stand. We have seen that happen in Kenya. We have seen that happen in Malawi. So that's one aspect. Right? If we got electoral commissioners who are firm, yes, they could become a factor in changing the nature of electoral processes in this country. Unfortunately, we have not had that. We have been unfortunate so far not to have strong men and women, majority of them, in the electoral commission. And General 7 does not have any interest in having an electoral commission which is independent, which would play fair, because by nature is someone who wants to manipulate people. So what is the alternative? We have to keep struggling until we cause change. I don't see any other alternative. By whatever means, those who believe in civil disobedience keep on building around that. Those who want to keep on organizing and through attrition, taking more and more seats at local levels, at parliament levels, until we overwhelm the regime, have taken that path. The worst thing is for people to give up and not do anything. I mean, I can't see how that should happen. Why would any citizen who pays taxes reach a point where they just simply, allow themselves to be plunged into a state of paralysis and they don't do anything? Yes, I can agree. They may choose different options and say, okay, this one, I'm not someone who can go on the street. If you can't, support a party to build and organize. Support a candidate whom if this becomes an LC3 or LC5 is going to change things down at the local level at least. But to pull back is one of the most, I don't know what word to use, really, to express what I feel. Giving up is not a solution. Frustration is not a solution. We have to keep fighting until we turn this situation around. Struggles are never easy since the beginning of time. But people who are resilient, people who really believe in their own dignity as a people, can never allow anybody to walk all over them. And then they either play dead or they just pull back and pretend that nothing wrong is happening. I think that's why I find a problem myself.
Thank you so much. I will invite another person that has a question, and this is Wanyama Joffrey. You can now speak, sir. Wanyama Joffrey is connecting. Yes, Wanyama. Unmute your mic, Mr. Wanyama. All right. Hello. Hi. You get? Yes. Now we clearly get you.
Yeah. Thanks for the moderation and then thanks, General, for making the time. I think I just want to pick it up from the response that the General has just given about, well, not giving up. It's quite ambiguous, and I think it has been to the disadvantage of the efforts in opposition. Because, General, when you say those who can participate in civil disobedience, you do that. I think there has been a general lack of the leadership in opposition defining a uniformed front and a uniformed action. And I think that's why we've seen that, for instance, you will pick up people said that in the end it's just scattered efforts everywhere which have not been consolidated into an action that can yield some results. So I think as a leadership in opposition, I think that's an area that you probably, in my opinion, not really done very well. The idea that there's some lack of direction, the idea that people should just pick up things that they can. There's just a lack of concentration, and I think even internally as a party, I think I struggle to understand. I mean, I understand that the philosophy is built. For instance, you're talking about people making contributions, but in the environment in which we operate, it's very possible that we will make contributions, we will raise this money, send it to an account, and the government will simply maybe just freeze funds for no reason. This cannot be unexpected. And I think the party as a whole seems to be a culture of compliance. So we cannot tell to what extent can we be expected less. I think I want to put it this way. The general, I think that overall you have a very, I think there are very many people that believe in you, though they cannot go ahead unless they vote for you because probably they think that will not materialize. And I think in part it's because the party has been branded a bit elitist. Our approach is so much to the educated people, to the middle class, people like probably, I don't know, working in the diaspora. So the party itself has branded itself as elitist, in my opinion. And yet, right now, I think majority of people, whether you've gone to school or not, they probably not suit into that class of elitists. So I think that's why it's probably easy for people like Bob Wine and these other people to sort of, they resonate a lot with the most common voter. So I'd be interested in hearing what the strategy is for the party to align. Yes, I believe in the organization, but how do we align our messaging that it aligns with the common voter? It doesn't look like it's a boardroom party. And even the elitist approach, I think we're not really taking very good advantage of it. I would expect that if we are a party that's going to take an elitist strategy, well, that kind of organization strategy, we would be more proactive in things like policy challenges. This government on just a random day would make up some decisions that anybody can see, but I've not had, for instance, as a party coming up with very strong, let's say, policy alternatives like CU or some big people in the party coming to give very strong policy statements, policy alternatives. So I'll be just very keen to hear from you what our culture as a party should be beyond compliance and the idea of branding ourselves as a party to align with a common quota. Thank you.
You're welcome. I think, General, as you respond to that, you will have to link it to what someone said to you in the past, that you've got all the ideas, but you don't have the masanyalas.
Actually, we are not an elitist party. I can't understand why people think that we're an elitist party. We're a grassroots organization. And to the extent that we've been able to raise whatever resources, every time we have raised resources, we have gone and worked down at grassroots level. There are districts where we have been in every sub-county in those districts, you know, and where we have been at a sub-county level. Imagine you go to a district which has like 11 sub-counties, and you go there and spend 5 days going to a sub-county morning and afternoon, you complete 2. 5 days, you've completed the whole district. Meeting leaders at that level. Therefore, the sub-county level goes and organizes the parish level. One of the things that I must admit is this limitation of resources in terms of Alliance for National Transformation. The moment we're able to get adequate resources, that's the exercise that we want to do all over the country. So how can we be grassroots and practice that kind of approach and at the same time be elitist? The two would be in conflict. 2, I know when it comes to funding, when it comes to large amounts, yes, it can be tracked down. People who have got big businesses. These people in government are crooks. They can run a person out of business. But there's no way they are going to run after someone who has contributed 5,000, 10,000. Most if there are many in number, if there are 100,000 Ugandans who have contributed 10,000, that's 1 billion shillings. Even if it was 5,000, you get 100,000 of them. Here, like A&T, 500 million a month. I can tell you that in 1 year and a half, there is no parish, there is no sub-county in this country that we would not have reached. And that would help in so many different ways. As to the issue of Masanyaras, we are looking at the strength of an organization, not Muntu's strength as an individual. I keep saying this over and over. Whether any particular individual has Masanyarazi or even if they are the best in all round, any individual who takes part in this country, if they don't have a credible alternative force that backs them up with teams of leaders at different levels, I can tell you they will not move this country far. That's why we concentrate on building an organization, you know? I mean, I can never try to have Masanyarazi, even if anybody told me what kind of things that one would do to get that to Masanyarazi, because I don't think that Masanyarazi really works. It is the organizational capability of the organization. It is the teams that you build at the national level, at the district level, at the constituency and sub-county level that will enable an organization to move a country in a correct direction and on a sustained basis. That's why we take the approach we do. It may be seen to be slow, but what alternatives do we have? Because 2 things we keep looking at. 1, removing the regime, but most critical also to manage power different. How will it help the moment power falls into our hands and we also go through the same vicious cycle like we have seen the last 60 years? Some of us have been there. I was with the General 7 and the group in 86. I know where we lost direction, you know? So that's why we must build teams early enough. Talk about corruption, which is really strangling this country. Billions of dollars, which are disappearing from the national coffers. These kinds of contracts, like you see, the robot contract, you know, it is almost now forgotten. 300 and something million, I think, $1 million just going down the drain. The coffee thing was about to go through. We thank the Committee of Trade that stood its ground. It seems that General 7 is now backtracking on that deal. At least he has come out and said he's the one who was behind the deal anyway. So you can imagine if a parliament was strong on all these fronts, what we could have achieved as a people, you know. So if you don't build teams, because it is those teams that would be in parliament, that would be 0C5 chairpersons, 0C3 chairpersons, those are the front lines of change in a country. So yeah, I have no regrets that I don't have Masanyarazi, but we focus on building an organization. I know by God's grace, we will succeed in building a credible alternative political force. And if it's God's will and we take power as Alliance for National Transformation, I know for sure, much as there are many skeptics, that will do things that hitherto were thought not to be possible to be done by politicians, because we focus on character. Nobody is going to change this country unless there's a significant number of men and women of character who are able to work in concert and on a consistent basis, and also to build it across generations, across different ethnic groups, across different religious groups, so that we have a national force, but of credible men and women who are there. This Uganda has got so many such people. It's just a question of how to attract them. That's what we need to do as opposition. It would be the most, I think, heinous crime for any of us as opposition to take power and just become like this group which is there, which is, I don't think people understand really what is possible when people are in power. People think that, you know, it's like Kenya, they used to say that bila Moi yote inawezekana. That's what the Kenyans used to say. That without Moi, that everything is possible. No. You can have a dictator out and have a new group which gets in, gets sucked into corruption. And the moment they get sucked into corruption, they want to protect themselves. And therefore they start manipulating the population, manipulating the constitution. So to withstand those temptations, you must be involved in preparation. And that preparation must be early. It is like now. It can't be in the last 1 year in 2026. That's too late.
That is very good. Glad that you're saying that they advise you to do certain things for the Masanyalazi and you want to. Probably in another engagement, I'll ask you what are those things. For gender sensitivity, I'm looking for a woman amongst these people that send in requests to us. We are about to close, and probably I will give an opportunity to 1 or 2 people so that we call it a conversation. So who is here? I cannot see any woman have sent a request here, but I will invite King of Uguru. You can, King of Uguru, you can speak now, ask your question as we get to the end of our conversation this morning.
Yes,
I can hear you.
Yes, thank you so much. I want to thank General Mugisha for such a wonderful input that has enlightened us so much. But my question is about the issue of opposition unity in the country. Recently, there were the by-elections of Omoro, and I happened to take time to go to Omoro, and then I was present on the day of the election. I asked a certain woman who was wearing this NRM t-shirt, and I said, you see, is so biting, but and the support the NRM have here is so big. What could be the issue? And then I remember she saying that, I look at all these other politicians, and I feel that they have nothing to put out. I see now there is a need coming up. There is alliance. There is FDC. So we will vote a body that is united, but not a body but not people, a group of people who are just disorganized. So I wanted to know, as Alliance for National Transformation, the vision is good, but how are we going to achieve the issue of opposition unity, which seems to be something that is very important? I will assert that I think the NRM regime has found it easier to disorganize the already disorganized opposition. So what is the alliance doing to achieve that, if that is anything to go by in as far as party politics is concerned in the country? Thank you so much.
The first thing we do, we don't just talk about it, also practice it, is to ensure that we don't conflict with other opposition parties. That's always the beginning point. Because if you are not attacking each other, if you are not provoking each other, then it creates an environment in which you can meet and discuss issues. I know in the past when we have worked together and fielded the single candidates, it has always been effective on our side. There's no doubt about that. But we must also realize that there are times when we don't work together for whatever reason. And you have to deal with the situation as it is, not as it ought to be. So when we're able to work together, like I remember actually in Amuru, in Amuru, there's a time when there was a very, very a by-election in which eventually Honorable Lucy Akello, who is representing Amuru now, came through. We had to meet as three parties, FDC, DP, UPC, the leaders, and we agreed on a method of how we could evolve and get one candidate, which we did, and we all went together. And they also had strong candidates. DP had a strong candidate, UPC had a strong candidate. They took them out of the race, and eventually Honorable Lucy went through. Also a number of other constituencies. But not always has it been like that. So when it is like that, it is good and it's commendable and we should encourage it. But where it is not possible, then there's nothing much we can do. What happens in that case, hopefully, is even when parties fail, not to attack each other. Because one thing I have recognized in Uganda, at the presidential level, even at the parliamentary level, even when there are many candidates, the population rallies around one opposition candidate. In very, very few times will you find them split evenly or by large numbers among opposition candidates. So in that regard, a party which gets involved, even if it does not perform well, I mean, like for us, we went there, we fielded a candidate, our candidate didn't perform well at all, but as Alliance for National Transformation, we believe we have a unique message. So wanted to sow seeds of which we'll be able to reap at some point in the future, because we would want to go down and start organizing grassroots structures. And hopefully in the process, we can also create an environment, hopefully by the bigger parties like NUP and FDC, to bring the working together. Because one of the parties has got to initiate and become the central actor, and then rally the rest around them. Before that happens, we have to move out and keep on building the organizations as we should be doing. I don't see any other alternative to that. What we do ourselves whenever we go even by elections, we don't attack any opposition party at all. In fact, we recommend that if you can't vote our candidate, vote for an opposition candidate. So even if we were not united, but we had a common message so that people don't read conflict amongst us, I think that would be a step higher. It would be an improvement from the situation where we go and keep on undermining each other, talking ill, of each other. That's something that we must fight as leaders in the opposition until we overcome it. Before we overcome it, it's going to be the reality.
Thank you so much. I was meant to have one more person, but I'm very lucky that I'm seeing a woman here. Logose Sarah Annette, please, now you can take the floor. Sarah, you can unmute and then your mic and then you can speak.
Thank you very much. I'm so glad to be on this space. General Mugisha Muntu, very glad to hear from you. And all those who are in the space, good evening. About our political party, there is something I would like to inquire from General. I'm one person from Eastern Uganda, and I haven't seen haven't seen a lot of vibe about a party of alliance.
Okay.
So what I was trying to inquire is what are the possible strategies that are being put in place for us to see that the party sinks. I know there is some work which has been done on the grassroots, but there is now, I'll give you an example of my district, that is Talija district, whereby you even sometimes people tell you that can you imagine people are drunk with NRM? Which strategies are we putting in place to ensure that NRM gets drained out of people's minds, because people think that is the only rightful party, and we are wondering how these other parties are going to be propagated in people's minds so that we have an achievement on the other side. Because the way I see things going, I don't know which strategy is being used to put those structures on the ground, because in my place, I'm sorry to say so, but it is really ineffective, a little. I don't know whether you have already reached there, General, but maybe that's what I would like to know, because it is really imperative to propagate this idea or our party in the whole country. In our place, I haven't seen it, so I'm wondering what could be the possible strategy to reach the people on the ground to ensure that people are educated and they are enlightened about the rightful change that we will need. As General has said, that here we are not looking at General as a person, but we are looking at change. How we plant that change in people's minds. We try to do so, but people seem to still have that dark cloud on their mind. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. General, as you answer that question, I will add this one, and that will be the questions for today. There's desperation among Ugandans, feeling pressed from every side by rising prices of commodities, inability to afford land, just like Robert Kapshen, the former CEO of the New Vision, said recently. What can you say, or what can leaders say to the people during such a time? And in one of this person is asking, is there a hope that things will get better?
Let me first thank the lady who asked. I didn't get the name, unfortunately. Thank you for the support. Come again?
She's Sarah.
Sarah. Thank you, Sarah, for the support. Thank you, Sarah, for the support. We have not yet been to Taleja. I agree with you. And the only way we can have a party in the face of people all the time is when a party is able to establish itself at the lowest branch levels. And the significant ones here is the sub-county and the parish. Because when you have party leaders who are well-trained, who understand the message of the party, and also well-organized to be able to disseminate that message, they are the ones who will be in weddings. They are the ones who will be in funerals. They are the ones who will be in churches. They are the ones who will be in mosques. So if you have got representatives at the parish level, at the sub-county level, and they are doing their work, there is no way that party is not going to be planted in the minds of the population. So the thing that at least we try to in Alliance for National Transformation is to establish ourselves there. The limitation we still face is the resources, which we are still trying to mobilize. So we will be able to get to all the places in the country by God's grace. We've been to a few districts where we have gone to every sub-county so far, and where we have gone, the experience shows us that that work is effective. So that's what I can say as of now. We don't have, we only have some coordinators in Taleja at the district level, but we have not gone below the district as yet, at least from the national team. And for the current crisis in terms of rising, the recent prices of commodities, there are only two ways in which the government could have responded. One is completely out of their means, because if we had fuel reserves, that would have been, an effective way of intervention. but we have got empty reserve tanks in Jinja. There's no fuel. I don't know the ones of the army in Nakasongora. There is no fuel. We have never expanded the capacity, and therefore we are highly vulnerable as a country in terms of a crisis of this nature. Because if we had fuel reserves, more so diesel, that could have been, could run a country for 3 months or 6 months, then government could have used that to intervene in terms of the prices of diesel and sustain lower the prices at the level at which that fuel would have been bought, or at a level where they know that they would be able to control other price of commodities because transportation is a high cost. That would be a significant and effective intervention. But we don't have reserves, so that's outside our means as a country. 2, if there was discipline and the leadership at the national level were able to tighten their belts, and the population could trust them and say, if this leadership says they are tightening their belts, they'll tighten them. That means they would have to have credibility for the population also to tighten belts. What would that mean? That they would have to lower taxes in certain cases, like for example, fuel. But that would mean that the taxes they have not collected, that they would have to draw back in certain areas of the budget. Now, when there's consensus on a national scale, then a country can be walked out of a crisis of this nature. But the situation in which we are, 1, this regime lacks credibility. 2, it even lacks the capacity to carry out interventions that will affect revenue collections. Why? Because they depend on rented support. Most of the support that is around this government is support which is literally bought with money. Where do they get that money? Through the revenue collections. 3, if there was discipline, money would be focused in the productive areas. They'd be looking at areas where if they invest resources that could easily start generating revenues out of the resources invested to do what? To meet the challenges that the economy is meeting. We have got a leadership which lacks discipline. Even in normal times, they don't focus resources in the productive areas. They focus resources in the consumptive areas. The size of administration is staggering. And you hear rumors that they want to increase, I hear, is it districts or constituencies? So you ask yourself, what mindset do these people operate from? Here we have a crisis. The levels of corruption are deep. We lose $1 billion United States dollars per year. You don't see that there was even an attempt to reduce on certain budget lines within the current budget in view of the hardships that the population is going into. Basically, General 7 takes this country for granted. The population flows along, and therefore, it seems we have to pay a price for a while until something happens. Unfortunately, I think that's the unfortunate truth.
Thank you so much. I think while hosting this conversation, I've been marked by a fellow journalist. I see Remy Bahati requesting to ask a question. So I will invite her to ask a question, then probably we can call it a conversation for today. Remy.
Mordecai?
Oh, yes, I can hear you well.
Great. General Muntu, it's always good to hear you speak passionately about the social challenges Ugandans are facing.
My pleasure.
Great. Yeah, I have one question, and this is for research purposes, for a research paper that I'm doing for Columbia and Stanford universities. And you hinted about income inequality, but you didn't go deep into it. And we all know that income inequality or economic inequality is a very complex paradigm that has paralyzed people at the bottom of the income and wealth pyramid. Young men and women and other marginalized communities are more exposed to this nemesis. And recently, President Museveni said we have attained the middle income status. And we can all agree that was really outrageous because a big section of Uganda's population is struggling to make ends meet. So from your own experience as someone who has been there for a very long time, like during the liberation days, even though economic inequality stems back from the colonial days, what are some of the holistic solutions that can be adopted to address the root of one of the biggest barriers of Uganda's growth?
Thank you so much.
The starting point has to be the starting point. I hope you are getting me on Twitter as well.
Oh, yes.
Okay. I think the starting point is discipline at the level of leadership. We pray to God that whichever group takes over from General 7 will be composed of men and women who are disciplined. Because the challenge right now, I don't think is because of lack of good policies. We have got many Ugandans who are well educated, who can be put into the area of, or deployed in the areas of policy formulation. As effective responses, the challenges that we do face. The biggest challenge we normally face is the implementation. Implementation requires discipline. Effective implementation requires people who are operating from a mindset that is aware that there is a natural process of growth, even the development process itself. That when you are in government, don't go in expecting that you are doing whatever you are doing because you want to enrich yourself. That's one. Two, that even when you plant, there is a period you wait to reap. And that is inherent in every seed. If it is maize, you know it is going to take 3 months. If it is coffee, you know it's going to take 1 year and 8 months. Now, the mindset that we have at the national level, in the leadership, which has filtered into the population, is this thinking that you can sow this morning and you go there next week to reap. That's a big problem. So when you've got leaders who are disciplined, one, they have got target education, first and foremost, because education is one of the key areas that leads countries to work themselves out of poverty and move into prosperity. Why? If there's good, focused education in all different areas, because educated, well-trained manpower that is also healthy. That's why you have to invest in the health sector. And that is also well-fed. That's why you have to invest in food security, in agriculture. That manpower is now going to be deployed in the different areas of enterprise. Those who go into, who have got entrepreneurial capabilities, that you invest in small-scale industries, that Ugandans can be invested in, those who are already in for expansion. Those who are not yet in to be helped in how to go in and start as many businesses as there are markets for. And then once that happens on a sustained basis, so that small-scale industries grow to medium-scale industries go to large-scale industries, a number of things are happening. It means that there are more jobs created. It means that government can collect more taxes. It means that if there's a disciplined leadership, it can invest those taxes again in the productive areas. Because for all those things to work, whether it is education, whether it is health, whether it is investment in agriculture, you have to also invest in a number of other areas like infrastructure, energy, road networks, transportation. So all that to happen, and also to create an environment, for example, where you have to cooperative unions. Fortunately, many people now are talking about cooperative unions, including those who are in government. How do you put money into the cooperative movement to resuscitate it? Because the small-scale operators, who are the majority, 70% of the population, the subsistence farmers, on their own, individually, can really not grow into commercial-scale agriculture unless you pull them. And they are organized around whatever they grow. If it is coffee, around coffee. If it is cocoa, around cocoa. If it is maize, around maize. If it is simsim, around simsim. And ensure that there are banking systems for agricultural interventions. Agricultural Bank, and we talk about that a lot. So a coordinated effort on a broad front of all sectors which need to be coordinated for purposes of sustained development process have got to be focused on. The only way that can happen starts with the nature of leaders. Leaders will always be there, irregardless. The question is their nature, the mindsets from which they operate. Are they disciplined? Are they putting country before self or what? Before that happens, I'm afraid that the inequalities not only will remain, I think they will even grow further because the population is growing. We are 45 million people. Another 25 years, we're going to become 100 million people. So you can imagine in this process between now and 25 years, if we still have leaders who are indisciplined, I can tell you the crisis that will emerge 25, 30 years down the road compared to what we are looking at now. What we're looking at now is just kindergarten stuff.
Thank you so much. You said something very important in this conversation that is my take home. You were wondering about how people resort to resentment, frustration, and giving up. And that's where I want to put my focus when I'm speaking to so many people that are really yearning for change in Uganda. Martin Luther King said that if you can't fly, run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward. Roy T. Bennett reminds us that change begins at the end of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
What does this really mean? It means that not until we realize that we can do things in the same way and expect results, so shall we realize that, hey, this will not happen, but we have to keep doing what we have to do to see change come in our country. I truly appreciate you so much for everything that you're doing in regards to building a better country. And I believe change is on the way. I can't go beyond this unless you have what would be your conclusive remarks or your concluding remarks to everyone that is listening in, and then we call it a day.
Yep. Mordecai, thank you for hosting me. Incidentally, Remy, you can contact me because I didn't have enough time to, since it's a research paper, we can talk over it, a number of other things over that. And I'd like to thank all Ugandans and possibly non-Ugandans who've been on these platforms, the different social media platforms, for being kind enough to engage in this conversation, to listen to us. And my prayer and hope is that we really don't give up hope. This is our country. You know, at the end of the day, nobody's going to fall from Mars, change it for us. We must invest time and effort and resources into change. And I really like to believe that the majority of Ugandans would want to see positive change. And that's what we're all about in Alliance for National Transformation. May God bless you all.
Thank you so much. And good evening to all Ugandans and Remy and everyone listening in from the USA. Good morning. I wish you a wonderful time until we catch up again. Bye-bye.